joining us. We are talking to Dusty Rader right now, who's an English teacher in Canton, Connecticut.
Yes.
And I'm having you on because you have an amazing, inspirational story that I think needs to be shared, and so that people can understand your world, what it was like as a child, and now at the ripe old age of 26, how it's going. So, you can talk to us about being a transgender. Person. Thank you for correcting me. So, as a kid, and I watched a TEDx talk that you did in Manchester, and we're going to put the whole video on after we do this interview so that you can watch it and understand this journey. When did you know? What age?
Realistically speaking, I knew when I was about 3 years old. That's when pretty much everybody knows their gender. You know, according to Freud's psychosexual theory of development, about at that age we start identifying with either a parent or an uncle or an aunt or somebody who is close to us. And usually at that point, we can identify either with our father, which generally means that we're going to be male, or we identify with our mother, which generally means we're going to be female, which of course is not always how it goes. But that's when we really start to develop our gender. We don't really have a gender up until that point. So when I was 3 years old, I knew that I was a boy. But because it was the early 90s, my parents didn't know what it meant to be transgender, and so didn't really understand what I was saying. And I didn't understand what I was saying either. I was 3 years old. I was still learning. And so when I look back at my life and when I reflect on, you know, when did I know that I was a boy, the answer is I always knew, ever since I started identifying as anything. And I actually remember there were specific instances where I told my parents, you know, I'm a boy. And they would say, you know, well, you're not really, you're like a tomboy. And I didn't know any better, and I listened to my parents at that age, and, you know, I hadn't reached my rebellious state yet, so I just sort of accepted what they said.
Yep.
And so even at that young age, I knew, and I had incidents where I would say, you know, why are you treating me like a girl? I'm a boy. Like if I wanted to take off my shirt on a hot day, they'd be like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, why?
What is that struggle like to appear as a girl, but you're a boy? What is that internal struggle like as you come into adolescence and then become a teenager? Is it just very hard to get up every day and live one way, but you're not that way? How do you do that?
I think it was harder once I realized what was going on, because once you're sort of aware that you're struggling against something, you're suddenly, it gets harder. Like when you realize, oh, I've got an itch, you immediately have to scratch it. And not scratching it is really difficult. It was kind of like that, where I didn't know for a long time, you know, because I'd been told so many times that I was a girl, I didn't know that I could be, in fact, a boy. So as soon as I learned that, and I went to this conference where I went to a Trans 101 workshop, and I realized, oh my God, this is me, you know.
And how old were you?
I was 16 at the time.
Okay.
I was 16.
And how did you get to that conference?
Who
took you there? Your folks? Did friends?
No, it was through school. It was through school. And I had met a lot of people when I was at school who identified as gay or lesbian and everything. And so I started going to those, the GSA meetings.
Because you're trying to find out.
Exactly. It felt right.
On.
And I knew that I was attracted to women before I knew that I was, you know, male at that point. And so I went because at the time I identified as a lesbian, which I don't anymore, obviously. And they were going to this True Colors conference in Connecticut, and I went along with them because I was like, this is awesome, you know, it's an opportunity where I can express that part of myself, because this was the mid-2000s and it was still kind of a new thing. People were still iffy on whether it was okay to be gay. There was a lot of struggles still even now going on about that, but at that time it was a very hot button issue. And so while I was there, we went to the conference, and it was awesome. And everybody...
Did you find Dusty there?
Yeah, I did. But I didn't know at the time that my name was going to be Dusty. That came later. After this...
You started out with what name?
For that day and for that day only, I asked my friends to call me Leo, because I really like Titanic. And
you have a sense of humor. I love that.
Thank you. I try. And I thought that was really cool. And so the whole day...
But you were born as... What was your full name?
I actually don't answer that question.
Okay.
Most transgender people will not answer that question because it it's a part of us that isn't really us, that we didn't get to choose, that we were sort of given and didn't fit. And so, you know,
because you are not that person.
Right.
You're who you're
I'm
supposed
Dusty.
to be.
Yeah. And Dusty was always there. He was just under the surface, sort of like trying to do what his parents told him to do and try to be the woman that his parents wanted him to be. And I was very lucky. When I came out, my parents were super supportive.
How old are you when you come out? So you go to the conference.
I go to the conference in March of 2007, I want to say. And then or 2008, and by that fall, I'd come out to my friends, and I came out to my family a little bit later because I was nervous, which was ridiculous because my parents are very accepting and very open towards the LGBT community. I am. I really am. And that's one of the things that I try to emphasize, is that my situation is not the typical situation. It's the ideal situation, but it's not the typical situation. So many of my friends have parents who just won't even talk to them, or who call them intentionally by the wrong name because they just won't. They don't want their kid to be transgender.
You are what you are.
That's what I say.
So you go to this conference, you then come out to your folks.
Yes.
You're 16 and a half, I think.
I was 17 at that point.
Okay, 17.
Yeah.
And you say what to them?
I actually was so scared of telling them that I had to work myself up into like an anger so that I could scream it at them, because I knew I wouldn't back down if I was screaming it at them. And I was so scared. And,
are you in the living room? Is it after dinner?
It was in the car on the way home from the mall, actually.
Okay.
We had gone to the mall and we'd like had a good time, and I kind of knew that I needed to tell them like that day. That was what I had decided. And we're driving home and we're in the car, and I don't know what I finally got angry about, but I let myself get angry, and I sort of just started like screaming things that made no sense. And they were like, "What is wrong? Like, this is coming out of nowhere." And I was like, "I'm a boy." And everything sort of stopped. And there was just this moment where they didn't know what to do, because that wasn't what they were expecting. You know, they weren't expecting those words to come out of my mouth. And so I said it, and they took a second, and they were like...
Hopefully they pulled the car over.
We were out of the car. We had just gotten home,
right.
Sorry. I got angry in the car. We got out of the car, and that's when I did that. And so we were just inside the house, and I was like waiting for them to yell at me and tell me, "No, you're not. We've been over this." And their response was, "Is that what this is about?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm a boy." And they were like, "Okay. That's okay. Like, you're still you. Like, we still love you." And I was so surprised that I started just like crying, because I was just like, "You're not mad at me?" Like, I couldn't handle it. I was so overwhelmed with knowing the reality that most trans kids don't have that reaction. And I was expecting the worst, and I got so lucky.
All right, so you tell your folks you're a boy. Were they surprised? Did they know that you were having some struggles at all? Was this a big surprise to them?
I mean, I was struggling in high school like a lot of kids struggle in high school. And a lot of the times, the LGBT community does have the added stigma attached to them that they have to deal with, and that often causes some other problems. It's not within them, it's the external forces on them. So I was dealing with a little bit of that anyways. And so, you know, we'd been dealing with that as a family, and I expected this to be their breaking point, and it wasn't. It was sort of the rallying point almost, where they were like, "That's okay, like that's something we can help you with."
So now you have an answer. You're a boy. You tell your folks. They're okay with it. Then what happens? Is there relief?
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't handle it. Like I said, I started crying, and that was just sort of out of relief that I wasn't going to be kicked out of my home that night, that I was going to have parents who were supportive, and that I could just be who I was and immediately start going by Dusty at home. And I went to school a couple days later, and I was just like, "Guys, my parents are okay with it." And they were like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Like, you're so lucky." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm so lucky." And getting to you know, share a safe space sort of with my friends when they would come over, if they weren't out to their parents, was...
When you came out, and now kids at school know, we talked about this a little bit. It was before social media.
Yep.
were you bullied then, accepted? I mean, what happened at school then? Did you feel safe there? Was it okay? I mean, I'm asking because I'm so curious.
I did a really weird thing where you know, I was always taught by my parents, you know, be who you are, be who you are. And we tell that to our kids all the time, you know.
As a teacher,
whoever
you do
are.
that now,
and as
right.
a teacher, I do that too, absolutely. You know, and everybody always says that. And we always sort of expect that, okay, if we can be who we are, we're going to be who we are. And so for me, I've always been sort of vocal about who I am because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with expressing yourself, and I knew that there were friends of mine that couldn't speak up. So I did a weird thing, and at the high school that I went to, we had this thing called Cultural Diversity Day, where different clubs from the school would host little like panel sessions or do demonstrations or performances. And so with the GSA, we were doing a panel on coming out. And I was already scheduled to be on this panel. And I decided that instead of just talking about coming out, I was going to come out. And so the way that they do it is you schedule your class, the teacher schedule a class to go to this panel or whatever it is. And so I was there and I knew what I was going to do and nobody else knew. I hadn't told anybody except my girlfriend at the time. And she had like sent me a text message in the morning that was like, "You're going to be great, Dusty." And it like just, all right, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so I get in and I have very little memory of what happened because my adrenaline was just so overwhelmingly high that day because of what I was about to do that I hardly remember it. But I came out to this classroom of, I think it was 3 English classes, a number of people who I had told to come, several teachers who I had told to come, the GSA advisors, the principal, 2 of the assistant principals, and I came out and the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. The only remark that I remember from another student was from a girl who I'd played field hockey with a couple years before, and she said, you know, I'm so glad that you told us. Like, I'm so glad to hear your story and so glad that you can be so brave. And I thought it was a little weird to be called brave for being yourself, but that is the reality that we live in. And so for me, it was just this moment of like, okay, everybody knows now, and I don't have to keep coming out to every student in school. And so because of that, I think I didn't get bullied a lot because I had come out and I had owned it. I owned it all the time, which I don't think is something that you should have to do. I think if you want to keep your personal life private, especially, you know, when it's that personal, it's like literally your inner identity. If you want to keep that private, you should be able to. So that's why I open up about it, because I don't need to. I feel so open about it because I'm so proud of it and who I get to be.
I'm going to look at some pictures that you sent me.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just going to go. So this...
That's me. That's me.
Do you remember this day?
Yes.
And how you were feeling, and how old are you?
Let's see here. This has to be my freshman year of high school. That dog's name was Ohav. And Ohav is Hebrew for love, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And we were training him as a Fidelco guide dog.
Wow.
So he was going to be a guide dog.
And presenting as a girl then?
And at the time you can see though, there's not much feminine about that. There's not much feminine.
Well, I mean, I don't see that,
hair.
but you see that perhaps.
Right.
Okay.
To me, it's like the only feminine thing about that picture is the hair. To me, the rest of it is just like, you know, that's a guy's t-shirt.
Now the hair's shorter.
The hair's shorter here. This is with my dad in San Francisco. And actually cut out of this picture is de Klerk from South Africa, who was the president of South Africa for some time. But this is me and my father, who has always been incredibly supportive of me, which I'm, again, so lucky to have. And I had not yet come out as transgender at this point. This is just a few years ago up in Vermont at a reservoir with...
You look 12 there, by the way.
I know.
You don't look like you... No, that's... Hey, work with it. That's awesome. Look as young forever.
That's why I've got the beard. But that's a few years ago. That's a different dog. That's Sawyer. He was a Fidelco guide dog for a while, and then he was retired early. Wow. And we had fostered him, and so they gave him back to us. And
what a great family you're from.
I'm very lucky.
Dad again?
Yes.
What was this?
This is more recently. This is just last year. I had the opportunity to speak at the National School Boards Association first ever equity conference. And I was a panelist for a panel on transgender students and
wow, look
faculty.
at you go.
Yeah, I sort of I came out that way, and I really haven't stopped talking since in front of people.
And I think there's one more picture.
I think so.
And this was
long
presenting as a
time
girl.
ago. This is so long ago. You can see I tried to pierce my ears because I thought that that would make me a girl. That didn't do it.
Do you
Lasted
remember
about
what
a
you were
month.
thinking then?
At this moment, I was at a Yankee game, and it was amazing, and I was just so excited. And all I was thinking about was the game, you know? And I was there with my brother and my dad and my grandfather, one of my brothers. And it was just a great day, you know? I got to go and spend time with my dad and my brother and my grandfather, who's amazing and all supportive, all always have been. And that was just a really great day with them.
You talk in your TEDx talk about the suicide rate.
Yeah.
Let's get that out there.
Yeah. So among transgender people, there is a 41% attempted suicide rate, which, again, I'm an English teacher, so my math tends to be a little faulty, but the rate is about 10, maybe 20 times as much as the average person. So that's a pretty
And these are
significant
attempts?
number.
These are actual suicides?
These are attempts.
Attempts.
So that includes successful and unsuccessful. But I think that even, you know, an unsuccessful attempt is significant because
Absolutely.
it implies that this person felt so unwanted by the world that they tried to leave it.
All right, so you have something in your past that you can relate to with that. You go to college, you graduate college, you're 22, and what happens?
I felt scared. I honestly felt scared because the whole time that I was growing up and becoming a person, I had been supported, and all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't going to be necessarily in a place where I was supported. And I didn't know what I was going to do for a job. I had a degree in English, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where I was going, and I was scared. And I thought that everything was going to fall apart, everything in my life that had built up to that moment. I was just so scared and so aware of the reality, aware that there's a reason that there's a 41% attempted suicide rate among trans people, and it's not trans people. That's not the reason. It's that stigma that I mentioned before about trans people that so negatively affects your psyche, where you know every day that if somebody finds out, they could just kill you or punch you. There's this thing called Transgender Day of Remembrance every year because so many transgender people disproportionately are killed every year. And disproportionately even more, transgender, black transgender women are the most murdered. And it's just appalling. And knowing that that future is out there, you kind of wonder to yourself, how am I going to handle that? How can I beat that? How can I beat knowing that probably 60% of the world doesn't want me here? And faced with that idea, I did. I tried to kill myself because I was so scared.
Were you home? Who found you? What happened?
I was living in Vermont at the time, and fortunately my roommate knew immediately what had happened and was able to call an ambulance, and I got taken to the hospital, and for some reason I'm still here. And every day, I can't think how lucky I am, again, to still be here, even after that. Because that's not easy to come back from, you know? I thought immediately after, I was like, even if I do survive, what am I going to do? I just thought I would just keep attempting. And again, I got lucky with my parents. They came to Vermont, and they took me home, and they got me therapy, and they got me to this place where I am now, where I'm confident. I know who I am, I love who I am, I know I have a support system. I started doing substitute teaching and found that I loved it. Immediately enrolled in a master's program, and now I have my Master of Arts in Teaching, and I've been teaching for 3 years. And I can't imagine that gets cut short for so many transgender people, that possibility of success gets cut short.
What is your message for transgender people?
For transgender people specifically, you can make it through. Even when it seems absolutely impossible, there are people out there who will care for you, who do care for you, even though you don't know. And even if your family isn't supportive, there are other people out there. I am out here, and I swear to God, I will love every single transgender person if it takes that. And to not transgender people, my message is just have empathy. Because what we really want, I mean, the whole point of everything in America is equality. And the only real way to get equality is to have empathy for others.
And how, Dusty. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I hope it helps a lot of folks. And I want to remind you to watch, at the end now of this interview, his TEDx talk. Thank you, Dusty.
Thank you, Ann. Hi. About 5 seconds after I was born, the doctors made a mistake that for the next 16.5 years would cause me intense emotional and psychological trauma. It's not the doctor's fault. My parents made the same mistake just a few seconds later. The mistake that they made was thinking that I was a girl. If you were to ask me about my gender now, I'd say the same thing I said when I was just 3 years old. I'm a boy, obviously. Still, when I was a toddler, my parents would tell me, no, you're a girl, that I would just grow out of it. And despite this, I don't think they understood it, but they weren't trying to force me into this box that I didn't want to be in. They were trying, like most loving parents, to help their 3-year-old understand the world by telling them what is right and what is wrong. And my gender was wrong. I was a girl. So I tried to be the little girl they always wanted. But I had teachers and parents of friends and neighbors and random people on the street sometimes stop me and say, are you a boy or a girl? And my answer always came out just a little bit choked. Like I couldn't quite say it because I couldn't quite believe it. And by the time I got to high school, I knew that something had to change. So I had this long, brown, curly hair that I absolutely hated. And I went to a hairdresser, and when she asked me what kind of a cut I wanted, what kind of a short cut do you want, I said, like a boy. It was foreshadowing, in a way, because I didn't yet know what that meant. I didn't know what it meant just to want to look like a boy, or what it meant to want to be a boy. But I'd long since figured out that when I saw a boy and I thought, wow, he has great hair, I wasn't attracted to him. I wanted to look like him. Later that year, my girlfriend at the time asked me to go to the prom with her, and I told my mom, and I said, Mom, I want to wear a tux. And she said, okay, how about a pantsuit? And I said, that's not the same thing, Mom. And she said, okay, so let's go shopping. And so we went to these stores, and they were all pantsuits, and I felt uncomfortable. It was like if you're a guy trying to wear a dress, and if you're a girl trying to wear, like, I don't know, boxers or something. But it felt wrong. It felt incorrect. I didn't feel like me. And so finally, after going to 3 or 4 stores, she takes me to this discount formal wear store called Sims. And I was amazed. It was incredible. It was the only store I'd ever seen where the men's section was larger than the women's. And even though she kept glancing over at the women's section, she helped me find this white tux jacket and a black shirt and black pants and a tie. And I had never felt so comfortable. I never felt more handsome in anything. And when we told the salesman who had been helping us that that's what we were going to get, he said, this young man is going to look great in that. This young man? This young man is going to look great in that. It was the best compliment I'd ever received in my life because it was the only one that recognized who I was before I did. And I saw my mom next to me about to correct him. But before she did, she glanced at me and she saw this huge smile on my face. I was so happy. And she remembered, I think, that before I'd even been conceived, she had just wanted a baby that was happy and healthy. Before anything else, before she knew I was a girl, before she thought that I was going to be wearing a prom dress, she just cared that her baby was happy and healthy. And I think that was the moment where she realized that I was as what I was wearing. And I saw her hold herself back, and her shoulders just sunk a little bit into comfort. And I saw the corners of her mouth turn up, and she just said, yeah. And we laughed about it later, and then she drove my prom date and I to the prom. About a year after that, I went to a conference called True Colors. It's this wonderful conference, and I went with all my friends, and we went to this workshop called Trans 101. And I had no idea what trans was. It was this abstract concept that didn't apply to me at the time. And we go to this workshop, and I am listening, and I'm exploding inside because there's other people who feel the same way that I feel. There are other people who get it. There are other people like me, and more importantly than that, there was a word. There was a word that could explain why I felt out of place in a dress or pantsuit or diamond earrings or long hair or a two-piece swimsuit. There was a word for it. And I'm an English teacher now, and I understand, and I want to make sure that you guys all understand, having a word to describe yourself is so important. Being able to express our identities is critical, and sometimes what you need is to have a label. So after this workshop, I told all my friends to call me Leo for the rest of the day because I wanted to be a boy and because I really liked Titanic. And they did. And I came out at school publicly about 8 months later, and it was Cultural Diversity Day at the high school, and there was a panel that the GSA was doing on coming out, and I was on that panel, and I decided that instead of just talking about coming out, this big abstract concept, I was going to do it. I was going to come out. And there were about 3 English classes in there, and there were the teachers of those classes, the GSA advisors, a number of other teachers who had come in, administrators were there, and I have very little recollection of what actually happened, but I came out, and to my surprise, the reaction from people was not disgust, as I expected. I'd expected the worst, I'd braced for the worst, but the reactions were mostly a combination of admiration and secondhand pride. Because they understood that what I was saying wasn't just that I was transgender. They were understanding that I had found part of myself, and that resonated with them. About a month later, after beating myself up over the disappointment I was sure that this revelation would impart on them, I came out to my parents. I was so scared that I was going to chicken out that I had to work myself up into a fury and yell it at them. And despite the fact that I had literally just yelled at them for a good 5 minutes, their reaction was, okay, if this is you, and we love you. They accepted that they'd made a mistake with my gender, and they helped me work towards fixing that mistake. They let me re-answer the question, such a basic question, are you a boy or a girl? And yet I thought so long and so hard about this question. I had gone through bouts of depression and mania. I had hurt myself physically and oppressed myself mentally. And now, finally, covered in bruises and scars and blood and tears, I could be me. I could be me. See, I am a man, and I'm transgender. The two are not mutually exclusive. I am just as much a man as any other man you see on the street. That doesn't change based on other people's ire or disgust. Nobody's identity is changed by other people's ire and disgust, no matter how strongly it is expressed or how often it is expressed. Nobody's identity is affected by what other people see or say. And transgender people, when they're allowed to express themselves, are happy. There's actually studies that have been done about this. It seems like basic logic. If you're not attacked and ridiculed for who you are happier. If you're being attacked and ridiculed, you are not as happy. This is basic logic, but they had to do a study on it to prove it. Because transgender people are often associated with mental health issues. But it turns out that those mental health issues don't come from the transgender person. They come from the reaction of the people around them. I was really lucky. My family, my friends, my school all reacted positively. They all accepted me and supported me in the best ways that they could. But that is not the case for many people. For many people, the reaction is negative, and because of that negative reaction, among trans people, there is a 41% attempted suicide rate. 41%. 41% of trans people have or will attempt suicide in their lifetime. That's about 10 times the national average. I was lucky. I was supported. I had my friends support me. I had the love of my parents and my brothers, and yet I am still part of that 41%. I was 22 years old. I had just graduated college, and I was afraid because I knew the statistics. And I was so convinced that no matter what job or place I found, that I would still be attacked and ridiculed in the same blatant and subtle ways that I had been attacked and ridiculed ever since I had come out. I'd given up. And I thought that I was going to lose everything. I thought that I had lost everything. And my mind sent me these words: don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. It repeated in my mind: don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. Don't think, just do. And I swallowed a bottle of Aleve and collapsed in the bathroom. I don't remember much of the next couple of days. Snippets here and there, a peanut butter sandwich, a narrow bed. My parents came and took me home. They took me to a therapist, and about a week later, I was on the floor of my bedroom crying. I'd given up. My mom came in, and she held me while I cried, and I told her I was useless, and she said, "You've been through so much, and you've never let it stop you. And if I know you, this won't either." And I was lucky. My mom was right. About 2 weeks later, I had a job, and about 4 months later after that, I was in a master's program to become a teacher, and I am today. I was allowed to answer the question. So many people had told me that I was a girl, and I agreed because I didn't know what else to do, but then I found out that somebody else had questioned their identity. And I started thinking about mine and what it means. And this has been my big question, and it's not the same as everybody else's question. Our identities are so multifaceted that we were almost never answering the same question. But this was mine, and I got to re-answer it because I had the love and support of those around me. But so often, people are not allowed to change their answer, whether it's one that they came up with, whether it's just a part of their answer, or if it's something that somebody else gave them that they didn't choose. And so often these ideas, these parts of our identity become places for us to be hurt. And so many people are hurt to the point where they attempt suicide. Their deaths weigh heavily on me. My suicide attempt came after I had come out, after I'd been living in a way that I felt was good for a long time. Yet still, the reality of what transgender people face day to day hit me. I was aware of everything. I was loved and supported. I was so lucky to be who I was, that I was allowed to be who I am. And because of that love and support from the people around me, I'm here today. And I constantly wonder if I still would be here today if I had not been allowed that chance. If I had not been allowed to question my identity. Would I have made it through high school, through college? Could I be me if I had to present as something other than me every day of my life? Could you be you if you had to be somebody else? I've only attempted suicide once. I was lucky. And I'm here today, and I am not just surviving, I am not just living, I am thriving, and I am me. So my message for you is this: question your identity, and let others question theirs. If we allow ourselves to express ourselves and our identities in ways that make us feel good, and if we can allow other people to express their identities in ways that make them feel good, we can create a world where nobody needs to stop thinking and just do. Thank you.
Spend all night kissing, and if was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store, but mine just to save time. Skip right ahead to the last ride.